desert for privacy. They want to be miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but sand and rocks. But many of these properties sit on top of forgotten history, abandoned silver mines, and hand-dug shafts from the late 1800s. Most owners assume these old tunnels are empty, caved in, and dead. But every year, a few trail cameras pointed at these forgotten holes in the ground capture evidence that something is still operating beneath the surface. Footage of heavy wooden hatch doors being unlocked from the inside in the dead of night. Thermal images of human heat signatures emerging from pitch-black shafts without any flashlights. And audio logs catching the distinct sound of old iron gears turning deep underground, long after the power grid ended. Today, we are looking at 3 deeply disturbing trail cam logs that forced landowners to abandon their properties within 48 hours. And the most terrifying part, the police refused to go down and check what was making those sounds. Story 1. The Miller Lot Hatch. In March 2024, a veteran named John Miller bought a cheap 20-acre plot of desert land in Nye County, Nevada. The property was completely isolated, surrounded by old abandoned mining claims from the 1920s. While exploring the edge of his property, John found a heavy iron hatch embedded flat into the desert ground, secured by an old rusted padlock. It was an old air shaft leading into a sprawling underground silver mine network. John didn't have the tools to break the lock, so he simply strapped a trail camera to a nearby cactus to monitor the area. 2 weeks later, John checked the SD card. The first dozen images were just tumbleweeds and desert foxes. But on the night of April 4th, at 1:45 a.m., the infrared motion sensor triggered. The first photo showed the heavy iron hatch wide open, flipped all the way back onto the sand. The old padlock hadn't been cut or broken. It had been unlocked from the inside using a key. The second photo, taken 5 seconds later, captured a pair of long, emaciated human arms reaching out from the pitch-black hole in the ground. The skin on the arms was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, with prominent dark veins. The hands were holding a small, neat pile of children's clothing, which they carefully placed on the sand next to the open hatch. The third photo showed a blurred silhouette of a thin, bald figure sliding backward into the darkness of the hole, pulling the heavy iron lid shut over its head. John immediately called the local sheriff's department. Deputies arrived and cut the old lock. They shined their flashlights down the shaft, but the ladder had rotted away decades ago, leaving a vertical drop of over 80 feet. The police refused to enter the shaft without a specialized rescue team, citing dangerous gas levels. But when John checked the ground around the hatch that morning, he found the pile of clothes was gone. Whoever was down there had opened the hatch again, while John was sleeping inside his house, just 400 yards away. Story 2. The Jerome Shaft Thermal. In November 2024, a cattle rancher named Robert owned a secluded piece of land near the historic mining town of Jerome, Arizona. For months, his livestock had been avoiding a specific rocky ridge on the eastern edge of his property. Upon investigation, Robert found an old, rusted iron ventilation pipe protruding 4 feet out of the desert soil. It was connected to a caved-in copper mine from 1912. Because of recent cattle mutilation rumors in the county, Robert installed a high-end thermal imaging security camera on a rocky ledge facing the pipe. On December 2nd at 3:12 a.m., the camera triggered a high-temperature motion alert. When Robert checked the recorded thermal log, the imagery was deeply disturbing. The video clip was rendered in standard thermal grading, where dark blue is cold and bright yellow is intense heat. The footage starts with the cold blue iron pipe. Suddenly, a massive plume of bright orange heat begins to pour out of the ventilation grate, as if something below was heavily breathing. Then the heat signature of a human-shaped head emerges directly from the narrow pipe. But this entity wasn't human. The thermal signature showed a body temperature reading of 112 degrees Fahrenheit, far above lethal human limits. The creature had an elongated neck and oversized bulbous heat signatures where the eyes should be. The video captured the entity slowly pulling its long, hot torso out of the tiny 4-inch metal pipe, folding its body like liquid heat. It dropped onto the cold desert sand, leaving bright yellow burning hot footprints as it walked toward the camera's position. Exactly 10 feet from the lens, the creature stopped, leaned its glowing head forward, and let out a heat signature blast from its mouth that completely fried the camera's internal thermal sensors, cutting the clip to static. Robert provided the corrupted file to the local university's geology department. The scientists confirmed the footage was genuine, but couldn't explain how a living biological entity could survive the internal heat and toxic gases inside those deep, unventilated tunnels. Robert sold his cattle the next week. He never set foot on that ridge again. Story 3. The Echoes of Shaft 82. In September 2024, a local urban explorer named Liam was mapping abandoned coal infrastructure in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. Using old topographic maps, he located Shaft 82, a deep ventilation tunnel leading into a massive coal mine closed down in 1954. The vertical shaft was sealed by a thick concrete slab, but Liam found a small 4-inch iron inspection pipe cutting straight down through the concrete. Hoping to catch the sound of underground water or shifting stone, Liam dropped a professional high-gain microphone down the pipe on a 200-foot audio cable. He put on his headphones, hit record, and left the equipment running for 3 hours while he waited in his truck. When Liam reviewed the audio log at home using sound editing software, the first 2 hours were completely silent, just the low, hollow hum of deep earth. But at the 2-hour and 14-minute mark, the audio captured something impossible. From deep inside the closed mine, someone began to climb the rotted iron ladder inside the ventilation shaft. The audio picks up the distinct, heavy metallic ringing of rusted rungs, flexing under human-like weight. Clang, clang, clang. The climbing sound continues for 6 minutes until it reaches the very top of the shaft, directly beneath the concrete slab where Liam had been standing. For the next 10 minutes, the microphone records the sound of deep, ragged, wet breathing right next to the internal opening of the 4-inch pipe. Then a voice whispers into the microphone from the darkness below. It didn't speak English. It was a perfect, pitch-accurate imitation of Liam's own voice, repeating the exact words he said when he dropped the cable. Is anyone down there? The recording ends with the sound of the microphone cable being violently jerked from below, snapping the line. Liam packed his house and sold his mapping equipment the next week. He turned the audio file over to state investigators, but the state closed the file, citing a lack of evidence of any crime. But Liam knows what he heard. Whatever is living inside Shaft 82, it isn't trapped down there. It's just waiting for someone else to drop a line.